Hello! So this evening we are sitting on the holding point for runway 02 at RAF Waddington in the Avro Vulcan, and we're going to be taking a look at some navigation and autopilot and flight director control in the simulator. So half the reason for doing this is when I looked at this the other day, I was a little bit unhappy when I watched some of it back that I'd kind of skirted over some of it and hadn't been very clear on what does what around the aeroplane. So we're going to go back over it and we're going to sit on the ground here for a few minutes and have a little talk about the controls in the simulator. So I'm just going to turn head tracking off for a moment so it's not waggling around as I'm talking. So the autopilot is down here. Okay, so this is the autopilot. So something I didn't make clear previously is the flight director, which is this. These are the controls for the flight director up on the instrument panel, where you can choose the lateral and vertical mode for the flight directors. So then you've got the HSI, or horizontal situation indicator, sorry, that's down here, the horizontal situation indicator, and then you've got the attitude indicator. So the attitude indicator has yellow bars on it. Those are the flight directors. So based on what you configure in terms of the mode over here and things like the heading bug or the nav radios, you can the flight directors will indicate what the aeroplane needs to do to achieve a given aim. Okay, so the white bar across here is the horizon line. There's another ball here that will go up and down, that represents your pitch of your aircraft, and this white ball will swing to the left and right in concert with the horizon line, to illustrate your level of bank. On the HSI, or horizontal situation indicator, you've got a needle that represents the direction the airplane is pointing against a compass. Okay, so we're pointed west. But the entire instrument can be rotated, as well as the heading bug. So at the moment the white line is at the top for the heading bug. So if you wish to control which direction you want the aeroplane to go specifically, you can use the heading bug to do that. But it may not be north oriented or aircraft oriented. If you push this knob in, you can rotate the entire instrument. Yeah, so this is what you would normally term as an omni-bearing selector. So you can choose, say you wanted to fly the 33-degree radial into a VOR station or a Tacan station, you can use that to do it. Yeah, you can rotate the compass saying, I want to fly that radial into the radio beacon. And then the aeroplane, if you instructed that, the aeroplane would start turning right if it's in the right mode to do it. And the way you control those modes is over here. So this is for the flight director. So the basic idea with a flight director and an autopilot is the flight director figures out what needs to happen and the autopilot makes it happen. Yeah, so these are the lateral modes in the top knob. You've got bomb mode, which is essentially heading mode. So when it's in bomb mode, if we wanted to fly, we have to pull this knob out to control the heading marker, remember. If we wanted to fly 330 degrees, we could move it to that. The airplane's pointed this way. So the airplane will start to swing to the right. The flight director will swing right if we're in bomb or heading mode. And if the autopilot is on, it will chase it, so the white circle will slowly fall towards the flight director, or chase the flight director. Okay? So what other modes do we have? We have remote mode. So if you're in remote mode, that means if you've got the autopilot, sorry, the GPS fitted, then it will take the guidance instruction from the GPS, but it works in exactly the same way. So as you travel through each waypoint on the GPS, you will see the flight director swing left and right to steer the aeroplane, and the autopilot will chase the flight director in exactly the same way. In the middle, you've got this strange mode, which means the autopilot can be on, but you can it's essentially the same as roll and pitch hold. Yeah, so although it doesn't say as much, that's essentially how to think of it. Is if it's in the center, it's roll and pitch hold. But it does mean you can then use the autopilot controls just to control the aeroplane. which we'll get back into. I'll go and describe the autopilot in a moment. If you have this on localizer mode, it means you can notice, look, it's popped up with ILS as soon as we did that. When it's in localizer mode, the flight directors will chase the course deviation indicator or the glide slope indicator. So I'm not sure how accurate this is to the real thing, but you can see the yellow bar there for the flight director. It will essentially tell you where the glide slope is. Yeah, whereas this one won't. This one tells you what way it wants to steer. This one kind of tells you where the glide slope is. And again, down here you get to see where the localizer beam is via a traditional course deviation indicator, which will swing left and right. Yeah, so when you're on the beam and pointing the right direction, it will stay in the middle. But we'll get to see that. We'll illustrate it in the flight. So below this, and I didn't really cover this previously, we've got vertical control. So this is where the flight director can influence or can instruct what needs to happen. If you want to stay at a particular Mach number, so it's kind of like the pitch control, which we haven't got to yet on the autopilot. So there's an IAS mode on the autopilot where you can, as soon as you enable it, it takes a reading of the speed, and then as you accelerate or decelerate or try to, it will raise or lower the nose to maintain the speed at the point you enabled it. And it's the same for Mach number mode, doing the same trick. Okay, so height mode, it's going to essentially do altitude hold. Okay, but it's going to do it via the flight director. Sorry, the director's doing it. So that's going to wiggle around trying to maintain the same height, and the autopilot will chase it. And you actually discover that altitude hold on the autopilot is better at it than height mode on the flight directors. Okay, so in the middle, doesn't do anything. You get to use the autopilot controls. And then you've got approach mode, which means if you've got nav radios tuned into an ILS frequency, not only can the aircraft steer itself down the localizer for the ILS, but also it can control pitch and chase the glide slope down to the runway or towards the runway. It hasn't got auto land though, so you need to think about a decision height and make sure you've got your altitude switched on. Also, the Vulcan has a very nice feature built into it where you can get radar altitude as well. I'm just trying to remember where it is. It's in the cockpit somewhere. But yeah, I'm not going to delve too much into it right now. Okay. Something else just to briefly touch on before we go and look at the autopilot, you've also got quite an important instrument here. This is Tacan. So it will, when it's tuned in on the Tacan radio station, this will point towards the Tacan beacon and give you the number of nautical miles to it. It's worth pointing out, the reason I'm focusing on that is because if you're using VOR radios and localizer, to track a beam, to fly along a beam, there is no distance measuring equipment, so Tacan is the best thing you've got for measuring distances. Okay, so what about the autopilot itself? If we go and look down at the floor down here. So by default, when you fired the aircraft up, you will have powered up the autopilot and it will be sat here with the magnetic indicator saying ready. So these are just like balls that rotate when they have a charge. So that shows ready, meaning the autopilot, the gyros have calibrated, it's ready to go. It uses inertial guidance and various tricks to know the orientation of the aircraft. If we work our way around clockwise, you've got the glide control. So each of these controls around the edge can be pulled up or pushed down. When they are pushed down, they are off or disengaged. When they're pulled up, they are engaged. So if we were to pull up the glide control, if we had glide indicated, or a glide path indicated on the attitude indicator, so the flight directors are showing a glide path, then this will chase it. Yeah, the autopilot will chase it. For the same reason, if you've got the flight directors showing a direction to go on the instruments, then track mode will track, what's the word? Laterally. Yeah, so it will steer left and right if it's engaged. Bomb mode, I'm not sure is implemented. I don't think it is. So the next one's interesting. So you've got indicated airspeed mode and altitude mode. So you can switch the mode while it's pushed down, while it's off or disengaged, and then pull it up to engage it. If you choose indicated airspeed mode, at the point you pull it up, the indicated airspeed is measured by the autopilot. Okay? So say you were flying along at 50% on the throttle and the airspeed had evened out and it wasn't accelerating or decelerating, and then you engaged indicated airspeed mode. Nothing will happen straight away. If you then increase the power to the engines, then the airplane will try to accelerate, but because it's in indicated airspeed mode, it will try to maintain the speed you're at. So to do that, it will lift the nose and climb. Yeah, because more power will allow you to climb. If you pull the throttles back, say to idle, the nose will drop, because the plane will try to decelerate, but because it's trying to maintain airspeed, the only way it can do that is to drop the nose and fall from the sky. Yeah, so we'll see that when we have a fly around. Okay, so if we push it down, you can't change the mode while it's pulled up, while it's engaged, by the way. So if we push it back down, we can then rotate it to altitude and pull it up. At the point you pull it up in altitude mode, it holds altitude at the altitude you're at. So obviously if you are climbing and you engage it, it will overshoot the altitude you were at, and it will actually descend back down to the altitude at the point you engaged it. Okay. Okay, should we actually go for a fly rather than just keep talking about all of this, and then we can see it in action. One thing more to point out actually. You can use the autopilot, you can engage it without any of these modes selected. So what does that mean? If you do that, the airplane will essentially go into roll and pitch hold mode. But when it's doing that, if you just engage without any of these controls, you can use the controls under here. So you've got a climb dive indicator, which will very slowly move the pitch of the aircraft up and down. You've also got a turn marker here, so you can select the wing bank angle. And look at, did you see that? Did you see the stick move? Because I've got the autopilot engaged. So the moment we did that, look, watch the flight director. Trying to go left. And it's trying to influence the ailerons to roll the aeroplane left. Obviously nothing's happening because we're not going anywhere. And you can see the stick inducing that as well. And now it's coming back into the middle. Notice how slow it is to react to anything though. Okay. So let's go and disengage the autopilot. Oh, it's worth pointing out one last thing about all of this stuff. If you have got track mode on, for example, and then you go and flick any of these controls, like the climb control, watch what happens. So I'll engage glide and track. If I fiddle with these, it's not engaged at the moment, is it? So we engage, so these are pulled up, and then I go and influence it directly through this. Is it going to do it? No, it's actually not going to do it. I was expecting it to disengage them on its own. It might do it when we're in the air. What about this one? So if we went for altitude hold mode and then we influence pitch, yeah, it disengaged it. Oh, so maybe it only works for that one. I'm always figuring this stuff out as well at the same speed you are. So I'm just sharing you the little lessons I'm learning along the way. So yeah, if you're using the pitch hold mode and you go and flick that switch, it will disengage that automatically, so that will override it. Okay, so disengage the autopilot. Let's get in the air and go flying, shall we? So remove the park brake. It's rolling out to the runway. So let's put the head tracking on. It's really useful for taxiing, he says as he can't see past the co-pilot. So the first thing we're going to do, I've pulled my head back too far with the head tracking. First thing we're going to do is make sure the heading bug aligns with the runway. Okay, so we're going to go down to the HSI down here. We'll align this on north just so it makes a bit more sense while we're talking about this. And you can see the aeroplane's pointed 20 degrees. We're going to align the heading bug on the HSI or compass. I think they call it a compass card in the documentation of the aircraft, of the real thing. So we'll align the heading bug. So if we then pre-prepare the lateral navigation on the flight directors to heading mode, this will be indicating what to do to make the aeroplane fly a 20-degree track. Okay. We'll also leave this, the vertical flight director, in the middle, so it won't try and influence anything, or not yet anyway. Okay, off the parking brake. Increase the throttles. Hopefully we'll be out of this horrible weather pretty swiftly. Head tracking on. So full throttle. Oh, there's some proper puddles on the runway, aren't there? Coming up through 100 knots, 110. The wind is starting to push us across the runway. I'm going to fight it a little bit, so let's rotate. And gear up. Now look, the airplane started to tilt over there. It's holding about 160 knots, so we're going to dip the nose gently to get some more speed on. So you can see, look, the flight director is waggling around, so we can chase it manually without autopilot to keep ourselves on the track. It's not doing a great job of it though, look. But then that's probably that crosswind playing into that. Anyway, so we've taken off. We're going for a fairly steep climb out, but we're not maintaining the airspeed, so the airplane started to complain, saying we ought to get the undercarriage down, but obviously it has no idea what we're doing. So I'm just dipping the nose gently. There we go, so 10-degree climb out, and we're picking up speed now. And it's wanting to climb all the time, look, so I'm going to trim gently to stop it from lifting the nose all the time. So we've got about a 15-degree climb out. So we should be out of the cloud before too long. If we want the aeroplane to do this on its own, all we have to do is engage the autopilot and pull track mode. Yeah, so it's in heading mode. So you can now see the wings are banking gently to chase the flight director. So as the flight director moves around, you'll see that circle moving, swaying along behind it. So the yellow line is the system on the aeroplane saying you need to do this, and the white circle is the aeroplane doing it, or the autopilot doing it. But it's very slow to react. So we're just coming up through, this really is horrible weather, isn't it? Just coming up towards 10,000 feet, and we're not out of it yet. So remember what I said earlier about the altitude mode. So we're going to put it on altitude mode, and the airplane's levelling out. So remember what we also said, that if this vertical switch is in the middle, it will do whatever the autopilot's instructing it to do. Yeah, so it basically stays in the middle. And also remember I said it will dive down again if it is overshot. We were climbing at the time we engaged altitude hold. So it's coming back down to the altitude we were at when we engaged it. It's just dipping down at 500 feet a minute. Look, it's doing it quite gently. So, if we go and look on the map, we're flying directly away from Waddington. If we wanted to fly over towards a beacon over here, just have a look at how heading mode works. Let's measure distance on the map and say we wanted to fly 241 degrees towards the Trent VOR. So if you remember, we'll go and look over here. So we've got the HSI, and we've got the heading bug is aligned. It's in bomb mode, remember, and it's tracking on the autopilot. So if we swing this round, 241 degrees, look, the flight director has shot off to the left saying you need to turn left. So then the airplane is following it, it's turning left, and that represents the horizon, remember. So we are turning left. I've zoomed right in. Okay. We're just above 10,000 feet, which means we can exceed 250 knots, and we already are. We're just coming through 300 knots. Spectacular weather, isn't it? Okay, so we're chugging along and the throttles are at 75%. So let's go and change that altitude mode. So we push it down, we roll the mouse on it to indicated airspeed mode, then we pull it up again. Notice nothing has happened. Oh, it has a little bit, look. It's already trying to keep hold of our airspeed. Obviously wind moving around and turbulence is going to kick it around. But what happens if we pull the throttle back? Remember, it's trying to maintain airspeed. So pull the throttle back and the airplane descends. Or it's actually gone level and then it starts descending. Look, it's quite slow to react. If we slide the throttles forwards to full throttle, to maintain the same airspeed, it's trying to maintain just under 300 knots, look. It's actually going to climb like crazy, rather than accelerate. So let's go back for altitude hold mode, and put it back on. I'm going to turn head tracking off for a moment, it's a bit... I want to be able to show you things that are going on here. So we're now flying that track that we wanted, yeah? And we're just alongside that 240 degrees into Trent, which is really handy actually. So we're going to go and tune in the nav radio to 11570 now in the aircraft. So to do that, we need to go into the tablet. And that pulls up this display of what the nav radio is actually tuned into, because this actually should be in the back of the airplane and they haven't modelled it. So we want 115.70. So to control the integers, it's this knob here. So 115. And to control the decimals, it's this knob here. So you just roll the mouse wheel on it. 11570. Okay, so that won't have affected this at all yet until we switch to localizer mode. But before we do that, we need to turn the omni-bearing selector. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to get it to keep going the same direction? Remember we said we could disengage track mode and the airplane will just happily fly along. So in those last few moments, we're going to go over to localizer mode, and then with track mode disengaged, we can actually get on with changing the omni-bearing selector to go 241 degrees. So we push this in and we can rotate the whole thing. The autopilot is not turning the aircraft at the moment, it's disengaged from track mode. Yeah? So, look at this CDI there, sweeping in. So if we say that's the direction we're actually going, yeah? Then if we engage localizer and we engage track, it will mean the autopilot will take control of steering again. And it's going right, because we're to the left of the track. Yeah, so you You can see that happening here. It's going to pull in towards the track, or the radial is the correct terminology. Yeah, so what this means is there's a line here. We've lined up the radial we want with the line. The autopilot is in a localizer mode, and track mode, or sorry, the flight director is in localizer mode, and the autopilot track is engaged, which means it will follow the flight director. Also, in terms of height control, the autopilot is in altitude hold mode. Okay? What's the alternative? If we disengage that and we engage glide slope mode and we say height mode, I don't know if it's going to be very obvious. Some days it's better than others, but it's not always great at keeping the same height, because we were at a steady speed when we went into it. But it will hunt typically if it's not exactly in equilibrium. If you use height mode with the flight director and then have the autopilot chase it, it will quite often hunt up and down. Now, can you remember we also said we could control the height if we turn that off with these knobs down here? So if we were to, we can disengage the glide. If we were to hold this back, for example, and hold it on for some time, you'll see the vertical speed starting to react. There it goes. But what we're actually doing is just inching this bubble slowly upwards. Yeah, when we control it with these controls. By the same token, we can get the airplane to roll. But look, notice it's fighting it. Even though we tried to do it there, it's actually coming back to localizer and trying to get back onto it, so it's fighting it. We'd have to turn that off localizer, turn off track, and then we can instruct a bank angle. Yeah, and it's slowly happening. You can see that happening. Okay, so say we wanted to leave the Trent VOR behind and fly down towards the, the Wittering Tacan station. So it's 123X we need tuned in on the Tacan radios. So to get to the Tacan radios the quick and easy way, click on the bottom screw on the instrument panel and you're here straight away. So we want 123 and X on the switch over here. This needs to be on TR on the switch here, and this needs to be on norm. Okay. So then to get back, you can click on the switch and you're click on the screw, sorry, and you're back in the cockpit. Okay, so now we have tuned in the Tacan. We can see the direction directly to it, so it's 130 degrees. So we could use the heading bug to do that. Okay, so if we just, to make this easy to think about, we'll just spin this round. Oops, not quite clicking on it correctly. We'll spin it round to have it north facing. So then it will agree with what we can see on the ADF gauge, just to make it easy for you to think about as well. So we are going south at the moment, yeah? So if we flick this over, we've got the heading bug, which we're not using at the moment, remember. We want to be going about 120 degrees by the time we've done the turn. Yeah, so I've moved the heading bug. Now we can go to bomb mode, and we have to make sure we switch on track. Okay. Notice our altitude is wavering around. We are not holding altitude at the moment. So we pull up altitude hold, and that will sort that out as well. Yeah, so that's wound out the vertical speed that was going on. Okay, so the aeroplane is turning left. Yeah, flight director's over to there. Because we are in heading mode, it's tracking it. Notice there is a course deviation indicator in play, because Tacan works the same as a VOR in that respect. So we could, if we wanted to, go to localizer mode. But it's not going to work, remember, because of the outside ring. So we're going to go back to heading mode for the moment. We'll let the airplane settle down. We're flying towards Wittering. But we need, remember, we need to spin this around. Now this is where it gets dangerous, because if we rotate the compass card, it will take the heading bug with it. Yeah? It's a... Sorry, no, sorry, I said that backwards. It leaves the heading bug where it is. So the airplane will start turning all over the place. It's a bit of a nasty one. So what we will do is turn off track and let the airplane fly along on its own for a moment while we go through this enormous cloud. We'll switch this over to localizer mode, which means it will... Oh, sorry, the middle mode, sorry, is Tacan. I misspoke earlier, the middle mode is Tacan. And then we want to spin this around to tell it what direction we want to fly. Notice we're stuck at a bank angle at the moment, so you need to be quite regimented about how you do these things. So if we wanted to fly straight to it, look, there we go. So then we go to localizer mode. Sorry, Tacan, not localizer. I'm misspeaking all the time, it's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, earlier on I said that this will use the autopilot control when it's in the middle. No, that's not true. That's Tacan. In the middle, it's just not written on there. The vertical flight director does mean it's going to use the autopilot, you know, whatever you've got configured, if it's in the middle. Okay, so the flight director is coming back in and the autopilot's chasing it, and it's trying to get the course deviation indicator into the middle to fly the 120-degree track-ish into Wittering. Okay, so we can start thinking in terms of coming over towards Lakenheath. So what we could do is use heading bug mode. We'll measure to get to a waypoint, which is at the point we would turn in for our approach. So we want to leave at basically 120 degrees again when we leave Wittering. But we need to descend back down, so we need to also check the altitude of the runway. It's 31 feet, so it's almost sea level. That's nothing to worry about then. So we want about 2,600 feet on the way into the ILS feathers. 109.9 on nav radio 1. So we'll let this fly along the direction it's going for the moment. Let's go and get the nav radio sorted out then. So we can do it straight in here. We don't have to do it with the dials. So it's 109.9. So at the point we switch to localizer mode, the CDI will reflect that. So we need to descend. Yeah, so we'll descend. We're at 14,000 feet at the moment. Let's descend down to 5,000 feet or thereabouts. So we'll go to indicated airspeed mode. And then we pull the throttles back. And watch the vertical speed drop. So we're now descending 2,000 feet a minute, 3,000 feet a minute, 4,000 feet a minute. So it's maintaining the speed we were doing. Now we potentially want to be going slower than that, because once we come through 10,000 feet, if we're following commercial traffic rules, we're going to put altitude hold on for a moment, just to get the speed down below 250. Because you're not supposed to do faster than 250 knots below 10,000 feet in commercial airspace. Obviously, military aircraft have exemptions, but we're going to follow the rules today. So it's going to try and descend now to get that speed back to about 230. So it will do an epic descent now. You can see the nose is reacting. You can see the attitude indicator is showing that. The attitude indicator only shows -10 and +20. So it's quite limited in what it can represent. So the height is falling off, it's descending at quite some rate, and it's slowly accelerating back out to the point at which we engaged indicated airspeed mode. So coming down to 97,000 feet. Oh, we're going to get some St. Elmo's fire. Might. It's not unheard of. It's built into the sim now to do it, isn't it? Let's zoom out and see if we get any. I've not actually seen it yet, but apparently it is in the simulator. So St. Elmo's fire, if you've never seen it, is plasma discharge. You need exactly the right meteorological conditions for it to happen now. So you can see like purple lightning bolts dancing over the aircraft. Okay, so we're down to 6,000 feet. When we went above 10,000 feet, we should have switched the altimeter to standard barometric pressure, which is 2992, but we didn't. We're not going to worry too much about that. So the altimeter's here, isn't it? So you can see there's the Coleman window there. So we've gone below 5,000 feet, which isn't a disaster because we're going to be descending to under 3,000 anyway. Okay, let's put the head tracking back on so we can actually look out. Can we see the ground? Not really. So has this weather lied to us? We should be coming out of it the closer we get to... Now we've gone to altitude hold, remember. We need to increase the throttles. Take control of the airspeed. Yeah, we're coming out of the clouds slowly, look. A huge weather system that we were flying away from that we saw on the radar plot. So the further away we get from Waddington, the better the weather should get. We could also go and tune in. If we're going to fly into Lakenheath, for example, we could go and tune in 39X, and that will give us a direct reference of where the airport is and how far away it is. So remember, we click on the bottom screw, and we want 39X, so 3 on the left knob, and 9 on the right knob. X on the switch, click the bottom screw to come back. We can now see relative to, we are flying, oh, were we still on Tacan mode? We were, weren't we? That was a quick catch, wasn't it? So let's push this out to 130 degrees on heading mode. This is why you really do need to plan ahead with the modes you're going to use to achieve your aims, because if you don't think about it, or if you don't switch off track on the autopilot, you don't get to switch radios like you do in modern aircraft. So 4,500 feet, and you can see our little wiggle we've done just over the top of Peterborough. Now we're going to come out this way, give ourselves a little bit more leeway. Okay, so where were we? We were saying we're flying 130 degrees. So we're flying this direction, and the base is that direction. But it's 30 miles away yet, look. And this is obviously going to swing left as we get closer, because obviously as we come over here, the position relative to us will be kind of 90 degrees off of our direction of travel. So at the moment we're actually looking, you can draw a line on here with little nav map. This is really good for this sort of thing. So we're following that sort of track at the moment, 130 degrees, yeah, which is what we've got on the heading bug. We have got a crosswind there, which is going to push us slightly off of that. It's not a very strong crosswind. Okay, so this part of the country is flat as a pancake. So we're going to go and descend down using indicated airspeed mode. Just dropping the power slightly. So by regulating the throttles, I can control the descent rate. Coming down 500 feet a minute. If I want to go for 1,000 feet, I just pull the throttles a little bit more and keep an eye on the vertical speed indicator. So let's just double check while we have some time. 109.9 is tuned in. So at the point we come into the runway, we'll need to have the Omni bearing selector set to 58 degrees. Okay? So let's go and do that as well. So we're in heading mode. Now remember, this is flying fairly level at the moment, isn't it? So we're going to turn off track for the moment. Because remember, when we spin the Omni bearing selector, it takes the heading with it. Now what direction did we want again? 58 degrees. So we're going to do this as quickly as we can. The airplane's rolling. Oh, this is so-and-so, isn't it? Then we want the heading bug to be going 130. So let's go and put that back on track mode. So the autopilot will start chasing the heading again. So we're down to 3,400 feet. So you can see that just that few moments of having no guidance and the airplane started to roll. (3,100 feet). Now you can see already we are below the glide slope. Even though we're not aligned with it, it doesn't matter which way the airplane's facing. At this distance, although actually no, we're not in localizer mode, are we? So don't trust that yet. We're not using the nav radio for guidance at the moment. So we're going to go for altitude hold on the autopilot. Okay, so it's going to pull it out at 2,800 feet, which is perfect, really. Flying in towards the point at which that intersects. So if we draw another line, you can see where that line goes. So what I'm going to do is turn the autopilot off. So I'm going to disengage it. So not actually turn it off, just disengage it. So I'm now in control. Yeah? I'm flying the Vulcan. And we know fairly soon we're going to have to turn to get the CDI will come in. Okay? We know the heading bug. Oops, if we go 58 degrees, wasn't it? Put the heading bug up there as well. It gives us a nice indication of where the runway is. We're losing height, but just put a little bit of backward pressure back in. So if you notice that as we get closer, we can actually begin our left turn. But we could use this as well, remember, to know the direction relative to us. So we're looking for it to be at 60 or 58 degrees, and we know the runway would be that direction. Does that make sense? So when this sweeps round to the actual direction of the runway, slightly wrong, haven't I? Yeah, let's wind this back a little bit. 58 would be there. So we're almost on the centre line. So aeroplane's pointing this way though, look, we're kind of 60 degrees off at the moment. Just keeping an eye on that. On the vertical speed there as we make the turn. So let's level out. So we're flying towards the runway. But the course deviation indicator is off to one side, and the reason for that is the localizer mode isn't on. There we go. So we can now see the glide slope and the CDI is coming in. So we got ourselves in the ballpark just by looking at the Tacan, because there's a Tacan station at the airfield. But now we can follow the glide slope and the localizer, because this is in localizer mode on the flight directors. So it's illustrating what to do. So I'm going to start slowing down as well. Also the Tacan is showing how far away we are. But remember, that's across the other side of the airfield potentially. So I'm going to level us out for the moment, just to wait for the glide slope. Let's get the gear down. We're slightly off to the right now. Should we put the head tracking back on? There we go. So we're off to the right, so we'll steer left across the track. We'll level up again. Almost on the glide slope now. So we're pulling the CDI back into the middle. Increasing throttle to allow for the bit more drag. And just lifting the nose to pull us up onto the glide slope. So you can see that the yellow line is slowly coming towards the aircraft attitude. So much for this weather not being so bad, hey? So keep an eye on the altitude and the distance. So 6 miles out, 2,300 feet, and here comes the glide slope. And you can hear the marker in the background. See, we're almost on top of the glide slope now, the CDI, sorry. So we're going to turn, yeah, we've gone above the glide slope now. I just put too much power on that, so we'll just dip the nose. And you can see directly in front of us now, coming out of the murk, are the leading lights for the runway. So we are too high. But that proves the radio navigation. Look, the runway appeared in front of us, and we are out of the clouds actually. We were just a little bit unlucky on the approach. Slightly off to the right. Shows on the CDI there. You can see that visually now. back onto the glide slope. And start extending the spoilers. So we've got 2 reds and 2 white lights on the Pappies, which is good. Now we're too low, we've got 3 reds. Okay, this is to idle, full spoilers, start flaring. So we've overshot the landing markers a little bit, not too much. So hopefully this flight has given you a bit more appreciation for the various different modes and some of the pitfalls. So I apologise for naming the Tacan marker on the lateral flight director incorrectly at the start. Again, just trying to fit too much into one video, I guess. But yeah, hopefully that showed you some of the pitfalls as well, though. So when you're rotating the Omni bearing selector, or the compass card, as they call it, it leaves the heading bug behind, which causes the aeroplane to turn, which is a bit of a nightmare. Okay, so we've just come into Mildenhall. There's an F-15 over there, look. Oh, should we go be nosy? I haven't actually looked around the rest of it. I've not landed at Mildenhall since installing it, so this is going to be interesting to me. Now I just want to be nosy and go and have a look at all of the American fighter planes. Probably going to get told off for damaging their taxiway with my monster aircraft. I wonder what else is parked. So there's an F-15C over there. And another one. It's nicely made, isn't it? Done a good job with that. Hangars are good as well. I can't remember where I got the Mildenhall scenery from. It might be an Orbex one. I think I might have bought it the same day I bought the Coningsby scenery. Oops. About to clatter that F-15 with my wing, probably. Let's have a look outside and see how close we got. We have lots of room. Huge base, isn't it? F-15s everywhere. Looks like they're all F-15Cs. I guess they've used the same model everywhere, haven't they, to keep it simple. There's a C-17 parked over there. This isn't anything to do with radio navigation, is it? This is just me plane spotting. Very cool. And then there's some of the cover for this. Is that some F-35s that are parked up? I think it is, isn't it? Oops, just taxiing across the apron there. Let's go and have a look at the F-35s there, shall we? Very cool. Go down the middle of the parking area. Surprised they got them out in the open. Awesome. Some money's worth. Many hundreds of millions each. What cool scenery. Will I actually fit through the gate? No. Wheel brakes! Right, I'm going to leave it there. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll see you again soon. Take care.